I'm going to start this video off with a bit of a confession. The second video that I made for this channel, the second one that I actually conceived, and one of the motives for making this channel was about how I thought about writing novels. And I had just finished my first real piece of work that I was happy with, and I thought that the way to go was to plan out your novel. I've come to the slow realization that I just can't do it. It's not for me. But how do you actually write a novel through discovery process? We know that certain authors do it, but is there a way or a trick that you can use to make sure that you get it right or closer to right the first time? Stick around on Punk Write. That's today's topic. Don't go anywhere. Before I actually get into a description of the process that I use to discovery write a novel, I want to talk about a few reasons why that type of writing is for me, and planning is not necessarily the path that I have chosen. All of us are unique individuals. We have our own personalities, and the most important thing as a writer, I think, is to know yourself, know what you are best at, know how your mind works. And for me, I'm a scattered person. I have so many ideas going on in my head all the time that it's very difficult for me to sit down and just think linearly about how I want to put things together. I see these pieces come together as a big puzzle, and as they fall in, I start to see certain aspects of this puzzle a little more clearly. The whole process of writing, for me, is fun. That discovery of what the story is going to be and what characters are going to do adds to the thrill when I sit down to try to write a story. There's a group of mathematicians, old mathematicians, called the Platonists, and they believed that there was this metaphysical aspect to numbers. Well, I kind of share that with story. I think that there are stories that somehow exist in some other dimension, and your job as a writer is to pull those elements up from those dimensions and put them together so that we can make sense of them here. For me, that's fun. That discovery process is what makes it enjoyable for me. And the last thing that I would say is that as I further my experience with the story, I begin to know the characters significantly better. Knowing the characters, for me, is one of the most important parts of driving a story. If you don't know your characters, their motives, their feelings, their inner sensations, it's difficult to put that in relationship to other characters. Discovery writing, for me, is an easier way to access what those characters are like because the situation demands that they act. And I believe that that is one way that you're going to get a more authentic feeling story. So those are reasons why I prefer the idea of discovery writing, and I know that it seems to work best for me. You should figure it out for yourself. The essential question for this video is, how do you get the story out? And I want to start with characters, because I think that if you understand strongly either a protagonist or your antagonist, one of those which will drive the story, then you're going to have an easier time putting that character in situations where the events unfold and they actually make things happen. Characters have histories, they've got their own stories, they've got their own inner motives. When you concretize those and you understand exactly what that character is going to do, then the story literally is going to tell itself to some respect. And all of this, for me, as I write and I flow and I have to throw out a lot, but I get a better sense of who this character is, and the more that I write and discover along the process, I feel like it just gets stronger and stronger. To sit down and conceive a storyline in a linear fashion, it might have its drawbacks in that respect because you're going to force the character to do things. I think let the characters act, let them be, let them do, and that's what makes the story interesting. But I don't want you to think also that it's totally random. At this point I want to reference another video that I made, last year, I think. It was about fractals. There's another method called the Snowflake Method of planning, which is a method of planning, but it's a bit less rigid. And the Snowflake Method, or the fractal method, lets you understand that you have certain points along your story that are kind of pivotal moments. Those pivotal moments are something that you should have clear in your mind. The beginning, certain aspects of the middle, important points of conflict, turning points. The end, of course, is not necessary, but you should have some clear direction of where that story is going, and the end is going to reveal itself. All of that helps you to kind of keep the big chunks or the big parts of the story in order. And if you look at the upswings and the downswings, those are going to be instances that will move your story regardless of whether or not you plan it or not. You should understand some basic elements of story to be able to do that, which brings me to the last point. Finally, I don't want to undervalue your understanding of story elements. To discovery write doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. You just kind of sit down and just whatever comes out. You should be purposeful about it. All of that begins with the idea of story arcs. Even if you're not going to use specific story arcs, you should have an understanding and be able to internalize what those arcs are. That will allow you to keep that in the back of your mind so that when you have those pivotal moments, you kind of understand their role in the larger structure of the story. Do not undervalue what everyone else has done before you. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, but it doesn't mean that we can't use it and contort it in a certain way as the story unfolds naturally. You know, a planner in terms of the fractal method might actually see individual scenes along the way. What I'm referring to specifically is, again, the major points where you can build around forward or backwards. Sometimes I get a scene in my head and I just need to write that scene, and I have a general understanding of where it sits in the larger scheme of the story, and that is fantastic. That's part of the process. I don't know what everyone else does. I'm actually kind of curious. So that's all I wanted to share with you today on Punk Write, and I am kind of curious about how other people go along their own process. There is no one perfect way to do it, but you should have some basic elements of flow, continuity, and excitement in your story that's going to keep it moving. If you have any kind of suggestions for me, please leave it in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and until then, you know what to do. Just write. Punk Write.